Look, thanks everybody for being here today. And I want to remind the group that the mission of the Infinite Hero Foundation is to combat the most difficult frontline issues, both mental and physical, that face this nation's military veterans and their families. And our five pillars exist to connect our military community, veterans and their family members, with innovative and effective treatment programs for service-related injuries. And specifically, those five pillars are physical rehabilitation, leadership development, family support, and the final two, brain health and suicide, really go hand in hand together. And interestingly enough, it is September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and we began an initiative early in December called Task Force 22, which was to heighten some of the awareness around challenges faced with veterans, specifically around mental health, and some who ultimately make the decision to end their lives. And so that's what we'd like to talk about today. And we brought this esteemed panel together, and I want to take a moment and introduce them. And I'll start with our clinician, Dr. Lisa Berman. Dr. Berman's a psychiatrist who has a private practice here in New York City. She's practiced for over 15 years, attended Well Cornell University. She's recently become the clinical director and medical director for an organization, a company called Mindworks, which is providing some innovative treatment protocols around mental health, not just suicide prevention, but around mental health in general. Not only the cognitive behavioral therapy, but innovative things such as nutrition and exercise. And so, Lisa, I want to stop just for a moment, let you talk a little bit about what you do, your experience in the community, and some of the things that you're seeing successful.
Sure. Thanks, Louis, and thank you for having me on this panel. So Mindworks is a relatively new company that was put into place a little while before I joined it. And at that point, one of the main areas of interest was to work on decreasing stigma around mental illness and to build community around mental illness, and to really normalize it and to make taking care of your mental health no more stigmatized than taking care of your physical health, and to make it also kind of enjoyable. And so the concept was to make it in a really comfortable place where people could hang out before and after their treatments, and maybe journal in this nice space. And of course then the pandemic happened, and so we shifted our gears, and rather than opening a physical facility, we transitioned to doing online therapy. And with that came some other changes. We had also had the idea of offering all kinds of other services that can bolster mental health treatment, such as yoga and movement and nutrition and acupuncture and massage and things like that. And of course, we can't do all those things virtually, but we can do some of them virtually. And I have found one of the reasons why I was drawn to this is that in my private practice, I found so often I was referring patients to see nutritionists, and I was encouraging them to do movement or exercise or yoga. I was encouraging them to learn how to meditate. And so I wanted to have this all in one place, because while therapy and medications are obviously cornerstones in mental health care treatment, these other approaches are equally important and is something that people can do relatively on their own. You don't need to be at a doctor's office to meditate. And these practices just really enhance all of the other treatments that we give. So that's what we do at Mindworks.
Lisa, COVID obviously has had a big impact on everyone's mental health, veterans and non-veterans alike. How's that changed the way that you're addressing your patients and your clients, and maybe how your company's approaching, receiving a treatment for mental health? A caveat: we know that the VA has transitioned, has made a big transition towards telehealth. And this has been a forced adaptation of that. And we think it's been in a good way. Now, obviously, there are things that we can do better, that the VA and others can do better. But in your experience in the private practice, how has this change digitally affected your patients and the way that you're treating them?
Well, it has changed my practice in so many ways that I could never have predicted. You know, prior to the pandemic, I was really resistant to doing video sessions. I would do the occasional phone session if I needed to, but video sessions were just, you know, not something I did. And then of course I had to. And what I found, so many interesting things. One, patients, never missed sessions. You know, they couldn't say, oh, I got stuck on the subway. You know, they were rarely late for sessions. So it's just that example shows you how much more accessible it is. And I have found that for probably about 90% of my patients, it's as good. It's surprising. It's surprisingly a good substitute. You know, okay, well, I don't get to see the person's body language when they walk into the office, but on the flip side, some people feel a little safer in their home to speak more freely, and you know, it almost acts as a buffer that provides a little bit of security. But the other thing that's changed during the pandemic that is a real silver lining, you know, I mean, I think we all have to look for the silver linings here, and this is a big one, is that corporations are so much more tuned into mental health than ever before. And they are actually looking at programs like ours to supplement their benefits. And, you know, it's just become an undeniable need to address mental health, because with all of us, you know, going through what we've been going through for the past 6 months, you know, anxiety and depression are rampant.
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to go to Morgan in a moment, that corporate America is sort of coming to where the military came. You and I talked last night a little bit, Lisa, about, you know, the evolution of the acceptance of mental health. And so that happened really in the late 2000s, 2010, 2011, where it really became an issue in the Army and then in the Navy, with senior leadership about how we address the treatment of mental health disorders, as well as destigmatizing it. We still have a lot of work to do, but you know, I think we're probably a little ahead of corporate America, you know, coming from the military space. So Morgan, this gets a perfect opportunity to you. 14-year Navy veteran, 14 years in the military, multiple deployments. You made the mistake of getting on an Army Black Hawk one day. That Black Hawk crashed. Nothing that you did, I think, caused that. You ended up with some pretty serious physical injuries, but you also had a TBI. And probably about this time, we were just beginning to discover that traumatic brain injury actually had an impact on mental health. And so you became very interested throughout your recovery. You volunteered for a clinical trial. You became very interested in how the mind and the body works in unison. And you follow that up with a master's degree in neuroscience. You've become a known expert in this space in our community in terms of speaking and talking about the things of mental health. And I think you're also pursuing your PhD. You might already have that, but tell me a little bit about your experience and what led you up to where you are today.
Thanks for having me on the panel. I was lucky enough, I guess the best way to put that is my injuries kind of landed right in the decade of the transition where brain science was coming onto the leading edge or the front lines, where people trying to really focus in on it. I'll never forget when I was in grad school, and this was only in 2014, my professors, and they were telling me, like, hey, look, everything that I learned in my neuroscience textbooks is obsolete now, and everything that you're going to learn is going to be obsolete in probably 5 to 10 years. And that has really come to fruition. It's amazing the changes that just in the past 5 years, I'll say that, the things that we've learned and the things that are coming out, the acceptance of mental health and the understanding that traumatic brain injury is not the same thing as post-traumatic stress. The understanding that you have to, and this was very challenging. When I went to DC to work for this Department of Energy, we were really getting in front of the larger departments, the VA, HHS, DOD, all the institutes across the country of science, technology, and medicine, and just having the ability to sit across the table with them with cross-functional teams that could articulate, hey, here's the science behind TBI, here's a clinician, here's a neurologist. Let's come together and learn not only just the science of it, but how do we articulate that in a way that the American public will understand it. And for you, Lisa, I applaud your efforts. I've been preaching to the choir about how you have to have a combination of mind and body in order for someone to come back to what either the proverbial baseline pre or post injury and moving past that. It's just been an uphill battle, but like you said, Lewis, it's really the times and the tides are changing. And that's a great thing. But nonetheless, having the ability or the horsepower to describe or give descriptive on something that we don't know how it works still blows people's minds, and they still can't get their head around that, hey, look, if you really don't understand how this thing, the 3 pound gelatinous stuff just between your ears contemplates thought, contemplates the contemplation of thought, we're going to have an uphill climb no matter what. And with this pandemic, going to online and all virtual, I can only imagine the Poseidon wave that's forming right now. And once we kind of come back to some sense of normalcy, and this is all exposed back to the clinical space, what that's going to look like, I may be way off base on this. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, you came up through a time where we were starting to discover that there is a brain injury. There can be a brain injuries beyond just, oh, it's a concussion. So I think the mantra was take a knee, rub some dirt in it, rehydrate, move out smartly. And you're going to, wait a second, things aren't working the way they used to. Well, I don't see a cast, and I don't see any stitches. What do you mean you're broken? So that wasn't really a popular thing. Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. When the science really started to back that, okay, so when you break your arm, you break your leg, you don't go do sprints, you don't go do bench press. And we really started to say, hey, look, the brain is if you damage the brain, if you concuss the brain, whether it's and there's no really, we've been doing extensive studies on this. There's no mild, medium, or severe traumatic brain injury. Okay, right now I think last time I checked, we're almost in the high 30s, low 40s levels of damage that you can do in the brain. And since every brain's different, every brain reacts differently to the same insults. Okay, so what we've been able to do, we did this with the NFL amazingly when I was at the Department of Energy, get into the NFL early on and say, hey, look, you have to treat the brain like you would treat the body. If they have an injury and you sideline them for an Achilles injury, you better do a lot more when they have a brain injury. And having the ability number one, for people to start just kind of realize that. And unfortunately, I think it was because of not only the military, the first responders, and our professional athletes, long-term, the older athletes and the older veterans that they're starting to present with these long-term problematic issues really gave us the ammunition we needed to get out in front of it and say, okay, hey, this is what a brain injury is. This is what a brain injury looks like right now. This is what a brain injury looks like long-term. You have to cast that brain. You have to shut that individual down. You can't just go back and exercise that brain. Because for like guys, us, like me and Ricky in the military, and you too, just think about this. Like when people will say, hey, look, when you have a blast, when you get hit with an IED or you get shot or your parachute doesn't open, right, and you're in a combat zone, what is that? That is the initiation of the game. Okay, that blast just clacks off an hour or 2 hour long gunfight. And what are you doing? You're falling down. You're getting back up. You're exercising your brain. I mean, your brain is firing on all cylinders, and all it's doing is just pumping all that cortisol and everything, all that poison into the brain when it should be resting. And we've had the ability to present just great science behind that. And that's what you need. Unfortunately, you can't really say something unless, and it may be just because of the times. You have, and what Lisa's doing at her gym, like acupuncture, yoga, and all the holistic, all those holistic stuff in combination with medications. If she doesn't walk in there and present everything that she has to a panel that says, hey, look, it's this that's doing this, they're going to push a lot of that stuff to the side and just go with what they know. Number one, because it saves their ass. They're not going to get in trouble because they have something that's going to back that up. And that's changing, luckily.
Yeah, and I think we're learning more and more about it. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the clinical trials you went through, some of the organizations that you did that with, which were, 10 years ago cutting edge. Today, that science is moved even further. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to move to Virginia now. Virginia, you have an esteemed career as an educator, an entrepreneur, specifically in founding organizations that deal with something that's passionate to you, but you're probably your most treasured title is mother, and you were mother to Angelo Merlin. I think he went by Merlin, who was in the Air Force, and Merlin did a deployment. He came back home, was here, and ended up taking his own life. You have used that as an inspiration to lead others. If you don't mind, talk a little bit about, what you've done, but maybe some things that led up to that you probably would recognize now that you didn't recognize then.
I can definitely tell you that I knew nothing about the science for suicide until after I educated myself, until after the fact. Once I did that, he had all the symptoms. His last week, he had them all to the T. And, I often wonder if my husband and I were educated in it, would he still be alive today? And that is why I started a suicide prevention organization specifically for awareness and prevention. It was down in Florida at the time. He died January 14th in 2006. So we're going on 15 years this coming January, and he was only 24 years old. But when he came home, he wasn't the same. Something changed in him. I mean, he went in as an 18-year-old, and a week after graduation, he was off to boot camp. And then 9/11 happened, and he ended up being deployed in Operation Southern Storm. So he just, he came back totally different. And my husband say, wow, military made a man out of him. He's more mature, he's more, but I saw that he was very withdrawn. He wasn't as outgoing as he used to be. He did not want to talk about what happened there. Anytime we asked him, he just, I don't want to talk about it, leave me alone, and he would walk away. But we didn't think anything of it, He then went off to become a police officer. But that didn't last long because shortly after that, he ended up taking his life. But we did not see it coming, not at all. And unfortunately, there's too many people that are not educated. And I always say education is the key. And that is why, myself, along with some colleagues, developed some educational programs. And we will go into as low as kindergarten, to teach them how to be kind to each other and this way, no bullying. But middle school and high school were where we went in with music, we went in with a band, and that is the way to reach them. And then, we developed a program to teach in colleges. We would go in right after the professor would teach the textbook suicide part of it, and then we would go in and do more on the personal side and tell our stories and make them aware of what to look for and how to ask the question. I moved back to New York about 6 years ago almost, and I started Heroes Among Us, specifically for veterans. I saw that there was a need here. I live on Long Island, so it is very, very populated with veterans of all different eras, and you'd be surprised, especially with the Vietnam vets. So our goal is to just provide anything that they need, anything at all. We pay for medication, therapy, we, mortgages, bills, anything that we can do. We're a very, very small organization. We're all volunteers, but, we do the best that we can. Excuse me. So, once again, I believe that education is the key. So I will not stop talking about it. I think it's healthy to talk about it. You have to talk about mental health, how it affects them. I've gone to many, many, many conferences with, American, the AFSP, and I mean, all over the United States. And basically, that's really the key. You have to educate yourself and educate others on what to look for. And it's okay. It is okay for you to ask for help. When I was told that my son passed away, it was in the middle of the night at 1:30 in the morning. And, we didn't know how. We thought it was okay, maybe a car accident. But when they told us it was by suicide, because, he had guns, of course, because he was a police officer. It just took us by surprise. My heart just ripped out. And as a mother, it never gets any better. It doesn't matter how many years go by, or, it's the question why. I know he was suffering from PTSD because all of that combined with, isolated. When he came back, he just lost himself. And we didn't see it. And that's something that, I don't want any other parent to go through. So thank you so much for all you do, because without you, the education won't go out there. So thank you.
Well, I want to ask you, we focus, and I think we get some hypersensitivity around veterans because, the nation is very patriotic. But the work that you've done, particularly in early childhood education and then later in education, do you see very similar symptoms that your son had in the organizations that you're working with? And so take away the veteran piece of it, or maybe the causality, which in his case may have been something that happened on deployment with post-traumatic stress or depression or those things. Do you see very similar symptoms? The causality is different.
Yeah, I mean, he started a week before he died. He gave away everything. He gave away his computer, gave away, he was very into Xbox, and he gave it all away. And anytime, I asked him, like, what do you do? And he says, oh, I'm going to get new ones. I don't need this right now. He had just gotten his own place right after Thanksgiving. So he just was very different. But I could tell you that about 3 or 4 days before his death, I saw it almost was like a calmness came over him. So that, that tells me that he was, he made peace with whatever he was going to do, and he had decided, maybe, I don't know. But from my, as far as I know, he never sought any help. He never went to the VA. He never went to, any kind of therapy, as far as I know. But he was also, he didn't want us to find him. So he called 911 right before, 3 minutes before he shot himself. He put a gun in his mouth. That was his method, shotgun wound. And he just, when the police walked in, he had left everything. They found a lot of his belongings and stuff like that. But his note just said, I'm sorry, I had to do it this way. And that's it. Basically, he didn't say, no, I can't live anymore, I can't do this, or I can't deal with that, whatever the case may be. But he did start going, the last week of his life, everything just changed for him. He came over a lot more. He spent more time with us. It's almost like he didn't want to leave. But basically the biggest thing was that he gave everything away. And that evening, I saw him that afternoon. Unfortunately, he didn't come over that evening, and then we got the notification. So,
well, thank you for sharing that story. And I want to get a little bit later in the conversation. I want to get into some of the signs that which you've talked about, but other signs. Chris Lees, good to see you, brother. Again, we last time we were together was in Colorado. You were giving a keynote at dinner. You're an Air Force veteran with a police background. You're bridging this what we call the civ-mil divide, and working with the company you're in now. You're the lead in your employee your employee resource group, and specifically around veterans, and then bringing together both civilian and veteran population. Probably, in reviewing your background, I realize that you're probably most proud of Jade because of her Army background, and so it's good that we have at least two people on this call, Jade and myself, who have an Army background. But you have three children. Two are still attending one high school, one in middle school, and then Jade is a combat medic. You struggled when you came out. You don't hide that. But if you maybe talk a little bit about your journey and share with us what you're comfortable with.
Absolutely. Thanks, Louis. Real quick. So my daughter is just finishing up Spec Ops training right now. So she's doesn't have a unit so far that we know that she's going to, but we're going to her graduation, God willing. Well, I don't think there'll be a graduation because of COVID, but we're still going to go and support and get her celebrated in October. So super proud of her. And my niece is also in the Army too. She just came back from a 1-year deployment. So happy to have her on our soil. So anyways, appreciate the time. And, just being in a part of this discussion, with all these heroes and angels, I think it's effective and important, but I love the fact that we're able to do this, even though it's not in person, just to stop amidst all the chaos that's going on in the world. Because I think a lot of it that we're going to talk about today, it kind of feeds into the problems of the world, but anyways, I digress. So yes, when I first got out, I really didn't have the luxury or the inclination to understand that there was things going on with me. I got out, and my biggest concern was, hey, I need to get a job. And I started testing and doing my background because I had my post certification. I was a cop in the Air Force. Had my associate's degree on the way out. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go be a cop somewhere. And by the time I got out, I figured out real quick that there were certain things I didn't want in my life. I didn't want to carry a sidearm anymore, not because I was, had problems with it. It's just because I kind of understood what goes along with that. And just, going to all the domestic disputes and everything that happened on base, I was like, well, I want a family eventually. So I went the other route and went private sector and, busting bad guys and gals and, catching shoplifters to start, internal investigations, things like that. So, and interrogations and, just all the fun stuff and the softer side of life, I guess. So it still got me to check the box on, doing something to rid the world of certain evils and then keep pressing on. It started to build up though. I'd say about 10 to 15 years after I got out is the first signs of, things were different. I was married by that time, had 3 kids at that time, and, just piling on the stress. I never cared about the stress, and I never did anything to manage the stress. I enrolled in online school. Like I said, we had young kids, and, these degrees here on the back wall behind me, I did those back to back while getting laid off twice. Worked for a bunch of great companies just because I just wanted the next thing. And the layoffs, by the way, were due to, financial problems or whatever within the company. It was everything personal, but I took it personally. It's a punch to the pride. So when you start thinking about all those things piling up, it just, my wife one day just said, I don't know who you are. And I got to say, it's, the things that really came out and were first road rage. I was always a really good driver, and I could speed, but I could get through, and just to get to my destination, I was just like checking that box that I was, evasive NASCAR maneuvering. That's all I was doing. But it turned into, cutting people off or getting cut off and then getting really upset and wanting to pull over and do something about it. And, that's just not me. And my wife started pointing out, things where, just a look from somebody when we'd be out and about, and I, come unglued, and, and afterwards I would notice that my kids are looking on, and I was like, okay, you know what? I can't be this person, simplest thing would set me off, and then, it would ruin a vacation, or it just ruin the moment or the evening, or, dining out, things like that. So about that same time, I had a really great friend who said, "Hey, listen, I can tell there's some things going on with you, and I need to introduce you to Infinite Hero Foundation." And I was like, "Okay, great." And I was already doing the veteran employee resource group at my company. I work at RNDC Young's, by the way, and it was something kind of new, but we were doing it just so that veterans have a place to kind of maybe get some more rights, but understanding about the veteran life and the way of life, and just kind of have some pride in esprit de corps. Then also civilians to who wanted to support veterans. That was a pretty easy thing to do, because everybody, like you said, Lewis, is patriotic, right? So it wasn't too hard to do, and the ownership of the company definitely wanted to put in on it. Where it started to get real, though, was I had a friend that I served with. So we got all of our deployments together pre 9/11. During the Gulf War, we were at the same main base, Beale Air Force Base, Northern California, in the middle of nowhere, and we pretty much deployed to Saudi together. Got short tours together. We went back to Khobar Towers after the bombing together, and just by the time we got back, he got out before I did. And he was all the way in Texas, and he was a mover and a shaker, and he was about 300 miles away or so from his local VA, so his care was not real apparent or close by. So he was definitely A, over medicated, and B, underwhelmed with care, and he really didn't have a circle around him. But he ended up taking his own life through the medication, overdosing. And that's when it hit me in the face that, hey, I need to go talk to somebody. So I went and spoke with the folks at Infinite Hero. And within, 20 minutes of meeting some doctors and scientists that I was like, I couldn't even pronounce their titles. I was like, wow, brain therapy is a thing. Okay, sure. And they asked me 5 questions. By the time they were done with the 5 questions, they're giving me their cards and they're saying, we're making you an appointment right now. So I ended up doing magnetic resonance therapy, which, flat out immediately, I got rest that first night. I didn't, the sleeplessness went away. But moreover, I had a clarity that I hadn't had before, or in a very long time, where, when you drive home from work and you don't remember the drive because there's so much on your mind, and you're like, hey, I'm in my driveway. I don't even remember if I stopped at any stop signs or what have you, or what the traffic looked like, just because I was just, you're just in that mode. This was completely different. I was excited to get home. I was excited to get to work. I was excited to get to the next therapy, which wasn't super easy, but it was worth it. It was down in San Diego. I live here in Riverside, and I worked in Orange County. So I did this big triangle. So I was driving probably another 3.5 hours extra outside of my normal workday. But I loved it because it gave me a safe space, and it kind of taught me a few things about myself that I didn't know. Besides the magnetic resonance therapy, what came along with it was some, I guess, as my son would say, life hacks about, resetting your body clock and getting that natural vitamin D, 45 minutes in the morning, whether it's direct or indirect sunlight, and using that time to kind of think about your day and what you're going to do, or not thinking about your day and just enjoying the moment and the silence. To me, that was the first, I would say, base layer or building block for me personally for this growth. And I've ebbed and flowed with, after the treatment, I was like, oh, I'm gold. I don't need anything ever again. And that's just not true. You've got to triage for the moment, and your body does react and get used to how you treat it. And so you've got to figure out other ways to make it better. Also, reality is we get older, and some of the things that were going on with me mentally also caused some physical ailments and pain. Because I do believe they're related, and I never related them before this understanding and this MRT and this, clinical diagnosis of, hey, when you don't sleep, your body starts shutting down even when you're awake. And your eyes might be open, but your brain is not functioning on all cylinders. And, you're not in control at that point. And that's why you have spotty remembrance, and you have, ideas about what may have happened versus what actually happened. And that's also why everybody's on edge. You know, when you think about PTS, you know, and TBI for that matter, when you're on edge, you have this, you know, the front of your, you know, right here in the front of your brain, in the front of your head, that's where all your decision making is, but it's also where all your emotions are. And without normalizing that blood flow, you know, you're running hot, and you've got to figure out ways to cool yourself down. And, you know, I know Lisa's talked about it and Morgan's talked about it, but I can't say it enough that, you know, I would guess my second or third layer in of kind of self-help is to change myself from a disabled vet to an enabled vet, which is, you know, first I got the mental situation under control because I understood that I wasn't in control. And then it gave me some building blocks to change, because that's the other piece here is I did this therapy with a few other folks that I know it didn't help. And when I say it didn't help, I at least know one of them for sure. He wasn't open to the help at the time, and you have to be ready for that. And that's another piece of it that I had to understand, that I was ready for that portion of the help, but I wasn't ready for the rest. And so my physical body, I was always not doing things physically because it hurt so much. And now I run into the fire on it because I know that I need to take care of my body. I need to take care of what I put in my body. You know, at that moment, I tried to stave off all chemicals, alcohol, everything that you can think of, even including meds, thinking I was doing myself a favor, but it wasn't really it. The intentions were great, but it wasn't the right mix of what I needed personally. And I think that's the best thing that I can share today is that, you know, understanding what's right for one person is not necessarily right for another person. But the whole point is that you're trying and you're always evolving. You're always looking to the next thing. You know, I stopped, I watch my carbs now. I don't put any sugar in my body as of now. I haven't done it at all this year. I've lost 52 pounds. And some of the things that, you know, sleep apnea and all the other things that go along with being overweight, but also being super stressed, and going along with PTS and going along with all the other, you know, chronic body pains, whether it's bones or muscle tissue, I mean, or nerve damage, nerve pain. I mean, it happens daily. But I can say that, you know, taking the time out to do some yoga, do some stretching, and then, you know, low impact workout, walking, you know, my dogs love it more than I do, I think, just doing something different and changing the conversation. So, and I guess the last thing I'll share, you know, I think that's been super helpful to understand, and you know, it's a place where none of us as veterans really feel like it's you know, we've got this, you know, like you said, rub some dirt on it and press on, right? That's not the right mentality when it comes to, you know, triage, when it comes to, you know, trying to fix and ail wounds, and certain wounds don't heal. And because they don't heal, they need to be treated with respect. You know, there's certain things you probably can't do, but what you shouldn't do is try to do it alone. Right. And just having your squad together. I mean, when we're in the military, we didn't do any movements alone. Right. So you get your squad together and you rally up, and being a civilian should be no different. It should be actually even better, because I feel like there's more selection points, right? Besides just family, you've got your veteran family, you've got, you know, advocates everywhere. And now, I mean, look at it. We've got advocates in our businesses, right? In private sector galore, you know, so they are listening, they are paying attention. And I think it's just up to us to share certain things that work, you know, and then be open to other solutions, which is obviously why I love Infinite.
Thanks for sharing your story. You bring up some very...
I'm sorry. I just wanted to very quickly say something to follow that, which is the work that the military has done to destigmatize mental health is so important, because think about how all of you are role models. And if you guys, you know, the very essence of, you know, bravery and valor, if you guys are seeking mental health treatment and acknowledging that it's not a matter of just pulling yourself up by our bootstraps, then I think it makes it so much more acceptable for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa.
So
We talk about PTS, but the reality is not everybody has PTS, or your post-traumatic stress may have been caused from something not in the military. Lisa and I talked about a couple of studies earlier this week in transition. 59% of veterans in one study who transitioned say that they lost connection with their community. And another 56% said they lost purpose and value. And so, not being able to identify and have that team, Chris, as you just mentioned, have that team behind me that, let me search for my sense of purpose and value. These things begin to set in and depression comes along. And so, when we talk how we arrive at these, at this place are often different vehicles, but we're there. And so I want to take just a moment. Chris, you mentioned that you like to reset your body clock, the getting your vitamin D. Lisa and Morgan have a lot of background and interest in alternative, to CBT or to pharmaceuticals and treating these issues. So I want to talk just for a moment about that. Lisa, if you could lead it off, and then Morgan, I'm going to turn to you very quickly because I know you're very keen on on that whole body experience. So Lisa, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, there's so much that goes along with taking care of your mind that doesn't have to do with therapy or medication. And that includes having structure in your day. It includes thinking about, what you are putting into your body. And Chris, you were saying you're off sugar, and sugar is so inflammatory to the body, and it's just going to trigger any underlying condition you have, and it's going to exacerbate it. And if you have any tendency to arthritis or muscle pain, it's going to get worse. Same is true for alcohol. Aside from nutrition, sleep is the foundation of our overall health. And if you're not sleeping at night, you got to start there, and that's a very, very basic example of how taking care of your mental health extends beyond just the traditional treatments.
I would say sleep is probably, in my opinion, the number one catalyst to follow on symptomatic issues. They create a larger problematic set for an individual than anything else. Mm-hmm. And it seems to be if I would bet if you canvassed 1,000 veterans or first responders and you've asked them to list what's bothering, I would bet 95% of them would say sleep. Even if you say, hey, you sleep. And people just don't understand that that's the time that the body heals. Mm-hmm. And to your point, and you say the sugar thing, I harp on this all the time, because when we, in the military, overseas especially, if there's something that happens while we're out on patrol and you get hit, just say you get concussed, you're part of an explosion, if you're not really down hard and they haven't taken you away or medevaced you, the first thing that you have to do when you get home is write your AARs. And what do you do when you need to stay awake? You just hammer the Red Bulls or the Monsters. If you have a concussion, you're feeding that problem with all that sugar and all that stimulation. It's just, it's just a terrible cycle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Morgan, you went through a brain study program. As I recall, it was University of Dallas program?
University of Texas at Dallas. Yes, sir. Center for Brain Health was one of the first programs that I went through.
And that was really, you were probably evolution number 2 of that. And so it was very early on in the process. Talk a little bit about what you learned, what the study, what you took away from that.
It really, and I thought for sure, Christopher, you were going to tell me that you went through the Center for Brain Health programs when you were going through your story. So just that, and I've done so many, and the reason I've done so many, it's not because I really put myself back together, but before I ever give an idea or a direction to a veteran in need, I go through a program beforehand to make sure that it's viable. And then I could speak to the science behind it and not send somebody out just to spend a lot of money and not get anything out of it. So the first program and then the biggest takeaways, and it needs to be understood, and everybody on this panel knows this, is that and Chris, you said this too, so it's literally, everyone's brain is a snowflake. Everybody is an individual when it comes to mental and physical health. So not every treatment, not every modality is going to be effective to every individual. And not all of the programs inside of a treatment are going to be effective for me. I just took away 4 or 5 proverbial tools to put in my mental and physical toolbox from the Center for Brain Health. And I tell you what, the number one, the main one, and I still use this today, is I take 10 minutes at the top and bottom of every hour and check out. And I get away, step away from all electronics, and I process what happened in that hour. I filter and focus through it, I pump it and dump it, and then I move on. And I do that up until the day my day ends. And then when I'm driving to work in the morning and I'm driving to work in the afternoon, no radio, and I'm thinking about my day. And when I get home, the only thing I'm focused on is my family, and I fall asleep like that. I mean, 9:30, when my head hits the pillow, I'm out, gone. No more restless mind syndrome. And I had that just like all of you. It was debilitating. I'm days without sleep. And I'm talking about half a bottle of NyQuil, 7 Tylenol PMs, and just for 2 hours, you know. And it's just in that space that we live, you just can't turn that off. And I had to learn how to do that. And I tell people all the time, it's like, hey, look, if you break your leg, you're going to go back to rehab, right? You're going to go to therapy, and you're going to constantly exercise that muscle, right? If you have a brain injury, you have to, if you need sleep, you have to train to sleep. You have to retrain your body to sleep, period, end of discussion. And it took 1.5 years for that for me, but I just never gave up. And so the program, and there was a lot of different things that they really kind of focused on, and most of it was about cognitive stall and cognitive overload. And they really went into details like, hey, look, do you have headaches? Do you get exhausted? Is your head tired more than your body? Do you get frustrated? And they just broke it down. It was like, our brain is not built to handle everything that's thrown at us. From the time that we wake up in the morning with a phone, an email, a text message, the news is on with the ticker tape at the bottom is going on. Somebody's talking to you. There's an explosion going on over here. Your wife's talking to you. Your kids are asking for some snacks. Oh my God, I'm overloaded at 7:30 in the morning. What the hell's happening?
Mm-hmm.
And they really harped on saying, hey, look, plan your day. And if anything comes in that makes you deviate from your plan, accept it, focus on it if it needs to be, but get rid of it. And that really kind of got me back up on step. And it needs to be said, I went through a very extensive diagnostic platform before I ever went down my journey to get fixed, just so I knew what was going on. And that's neck up and neck down, not body, brain. And I had a portfolio that was about this thick. And I took it everywhere I went. And I was like, this is what I'm working with. And we just started checking off the box, which we don't do that for everybody, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. Lisa, I want to ask you, building on what Morgan just said, you know, not everyone has the opportunity to have a therapist, to have a clinician. What are some things that they can start thinking about doing, again, building on what Morgan said, to address some of these issues, on their own? Yeah.
I mean, what Morgan's done is he has structured mindfulness into his day. And mindfulness is the practice of being present and aware of your surroundings internally, externally, rather than just kind of floating through life and being a kind of pinball, but really sort of having more connection to everything going on. And that's one reason why meditation is important, because it helps you to develop the skill of mindfulness. It's one reason why yoga is so valuable. Same thing, teaches you how to just be present in the moment. So those are some things that can help very much. And again, I can't emphasize it enough. Nutrition, really optimizing your nutrition and getting rid of processed foods as much as possible. It sounds like a, completely unrelated topic, but it's not. Those chemicals are not good for your brain or the rest of your body. And eating whole foods, fruits and vegetables is going to make anybody feel physically and mentally better. And just, moving your body, making sure that you do get some regular exercise, and also, again, optimizing sleep. Those are all things that contribute to improving mental health. and connecting with others. You know, during the pandemic, that's one of the things that's been really difficult. But and that's one of the reasons why there's such an increase in depression, is that people are so much more isolated than normal. But you know, we are you know, herd animals, and as much as we all might need our alone time to really decompress, we also need social contact.
Good, thank you. Ricky.
Yes, sir.
So I'm sorry, man. I didn't see you on the screen,
all
and I
good.
apologize. Take a couple minutes and tell
I
us
could
about.
get that beard. Yeah.
he's
Yeah,
got the
COVID.
epic veteran beard.
COVID.
So I own that, man. Give us a couple minutes about your story, and then I've got a couple questions for you.
All right. Yeah. So my story is I was blown up a couple times, one major time in Iraq, and it was in late August in 08. And so, like everyone knows, you Charlie Mike past that. By the time I got done, you know, with my morning, I was already going through a psych eval to make sure I was emotionally ready to go back out. And of course I was, because no one was going to tell me I wasn't. And so I finished out the year, came back late November in 08. And then 5 months later in 09, I was paralyzed in a car accident. The truck flipped and crushed my back and paralyzed me. And then on top of that, my wife was pregnant, 4 months pregnant at the time. So there's a lot of life happened at that point. And just to, like you said, that Virginia, like, you're not the same person, you know, like people recognize you're not the same person, but you also take into account you just experienced something that a lot of people haven't, and you shouldn't be the same person as you were when you're 18. So it's really hard to pick up on those subtle signs and understand what is a natural progression of a person moving through life, and then what is actually part of a traumatic injury or, you know, PTSD, because, you know, trauma to your body can do so many changes, as I've learned throughout my time. And then, so I went through, you know, all this crazy life cycle, and it took me many years to finally ask for help. And I didn't ask for help until after we came back from Disney World with my son. And I realized you just go to the happiest place on earth, and I wasn't happy. And I was more stressed out and angry the whole time. So when I go back to the VA, you do that whole, I call it the VA shuffle. You get shuffled around a little bit, you find a couple therapists, and then you get transitioned so many different times. You don't trust people to be vulnerable, to open up. And that's what it takes to own that vulnerability, to open up in therapy. And if you get shuffled around, you can't have that. So it wasn't until with the boot campaign, and I was at a retreat with them, and I was speaking with Alex Oliver Ollie, and you know, about this whole program that Morgan kind of set up for the boot campaign. At that time had a different name, was Reboot. And then, you know, I was like, whatever, I'll try it. Mainly because my wife at the time, it was pretty much, I do that. I was already sleeping in the guest bedroom in my dark place. Like I was, you know, I was not going anywhere positive. And what is there left? So I tried it, and it was life-changing because of, it was understood, like Morgan says, everyone's a snowflake, not in a bad way, but your brain's different than everyone else's. And so I spent a week of testing, and it was from head to toe testing every possible scenario. And then, like, they say, okay, after that week, they do an assessment and say, all right, let's lay out this treatment protocol. And then you start, you know, your treatment protocol, which I went through 8 weeks of TDCS, you know, that transcranial direct current stimulation. And then on top of that, you did psychotherapy 3 times a week as well. But then they alternated when psychotherapy versus the TDCS treatment. So to keep that blood flow up in that front prefrontal cortex so you can process your emotions, because a lot of times what a lot of people do when you go into a therapist's office, you're already on the defense. So you're already shutting down protecting yourself because you don't want to be vulnerable with that person. So with that, keeping that blood flow up front, it allowed me, and I can tell you now, I still process those events and stuff. I remember them better than I have other things in the past. Like I still remember that treatment and that whole 8 weeks. And it's amazing on what a little current to your brain will do and how much your brain actually works through that process. Because after that first day of treatment, I just went back to my hotel room. I crashed. I slept. Like my brain, I was so tired. And it was like more like I didn't know what true sleep felt like anymore. And it was through that whole period that I started to understand the connection between your diet, because I started diving into the whole science of it all, because I need education is key to understanding why you're doing the treatments and how to hold on to the treatment. So I went through all that for the 8 weeks, and then I go to Virginia Beach for 4 weeks to tie in the physical fitness portion. And while you're there, you're doing a cognitive speech therapy, and they have a pre-made diet for you. So it's that whole program. It took a while for me, but it was life-changing. And it led me on a path to where I wanted to inform other people of, these small things that you can do to kind of help start that path, because we've lost in my unit after we come home, we've lost a lot of people because of their service, and I say that because we have people who die in service, and then we have people who've lost their lives because of service. And those are all the suicides. And, I don't want to discredit people, because that service, they're still struggling because of what happened. And the traumatic brain injuries just are, is unreal on what a traumatic brain injury can change you and how you look at life.
So you had this moment, and it was following your trip to the human trap operated by a rat, where you said, I could handle getting blown up and go out the next day, or maybe even that night again, but I'm having a hard time managing a trip to Disney World. Tell me a little bit about how that felt, like that realization, like, damn it, I need some help.
It felt like, I don't know, I can accomplish anything. And I've done, and that's what, like, I knew I could physically push on and do anything I needed, but emotionally I wasn't able. And that's where it kind of scared me, because I wasn't emotionally available for my son. And, that's everyone's hope, is to be able to bring on that next generation better than what we were brought on, right? That trickle down, that 3-generation trickle down of parenting. I want to be a better parent than my father, and my father wants to be. So I'm trying to do that 1 degree change with him. And then I realized I can't do that and feel like I'm drowning at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's what led me to actually go see help, is I knew I couldn't be a better father if I didn't set the example and emotionally be there. And I see the effects. My son's war are my battles. And so, he's living through all my struggles and all my mistakes early on.
Yeah. And you're also a good example then for other people who, I think about my goddaughter's father, who called me and he said, I think I'm having some problems. And I said, what makes you think that? He said, well, I sort of realized I had the Uber driver's neck in my hands last night because I was pissed at him. I don't know why. I need some help. And so you become that person who can say, okay, look, I've done that. So I want to pose one final question to the panel.
Hey, you're not supposed to milk out Uber drivers?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. I need to write that down.
Yeah.
Don't do that. It's bad. You get a bad review when you do that. But I want to ask one question to everybody on the panel. We've all been leaders in different ways in terms of getting help for issues we had, whether PTS or depression or TBI-led cognitive issues. If you had a piece of advice to give to someone who might be struggling, whether it's a family member who's recognizing some of those things in Virginia's case, or individually, what would that piece of advice be? And I'd like an answer from everybody on the panel. Whoever would like to go first.
I'll go first and let the ladies want to go. My advice to a loved one, first and foremost, is that do not be scared, intimidated, or feel sorry for that individual. It is incumbent on you to say, I see what you don't see. So many times what I see and hear is that the family was like, well, he said he was in pain, or she said she was depressed. What are we supposed to do? Say that she's not? Yes. I just think there's situations where if the family member or a significant other does not step in and hold their ground, things could be prevented. And for the individual themselves, if they have an issue, this is 2020. I really don't think there's anything that's out of bounds or taboo anymore. Okay, and I don't mean that in any disrespectful way whatsoever. And when I'm addressing someone, I literally grabbed him by the shoulders and I was like, excuse my language, I was like, hey, what the fuck is your problem? Sorry, Virginia and Lisa, but I mean, it almost comes to a point where you need to say that. Somebody has to give them that proverbial slap in the face because they may not see it. It could be such a slippery slope and have snowballed them. They don't know what you know. And it's okay to seek treatment.
Agree. Chris?
I mean, along the same lines as Morgan said, I mean, the folks in your squad or your circle of trust, I mean, they can't be pushovers, right? They've got to stand their ground, so to speak. And they have to be the ones to give it to you straight. So for me, it's my wife. She's got no issues, holding me to task. And there's sometimes where I'm like, okay, maybe you're overdoing it, but you have to have that person in your life. And if it's a parent because you've got that fear factor from when you were little, because they're going to tell you exactly what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, then that's what you need. And the other thing is, if you're not equipped, if somebody comes up to you and they've got an issue and you're not equipped, and they grab a partner, grab somebody else that is equipped to handle the situation. Don't just stew on it or toil or, don't let time pass either. It's okay to share the baton or even pass it. I wouldn't pass it per se, but I would definitely share the baton and bring somebody else into the circle that may be a little bit more versed on how to get to the next step. Especially if it's, like Virginia, those signs and symptoms with my friend, they were all there. And I wasn't in Texas, I was in California, but all of those things were there. He gave his things away. He was winning a multi-million-dollar settlement because, his life was full of drama, and him and his daughter got hit by a bus. So, they were going to get paid out. He had all these things to live for, but he didn't care about those things anymore. So paying attention to those signs and then calling them out. Right? Because if they're in the dark, in the hurdy hole, they're allowed to flourish, right? You put light on that. Put light on that and then hold people to task, not in a demeaning way, but in a, hey, get your shit together way. Or let's get your shit together. So sorry for the cussing, but that's a little passion there.
Virginia.
I definitely agree with both of you. It's one of the things that I always, when I went into the colleges and stuff and to the schools, it is okay to ask for help. And your circle, as you say, Chris, your circle, that person's character. If something is out of character, it is, for me, I always told them that it is your duty to approach them and to ask them, what is going on here? Let's sit down, let's talk about it, and don't give up on that. If they keep showing all the, especially retreating back and, they don't want to hang out anymore or whatever the case may be, that person's characters. And if it's out of character in any way, you have to ask the question. And ask the question directly, are you thinking about, hurting yourself? And then if they say yes, make sure you have all the information with you so that you can act on it right away. And you're right, Christopher, you have to get someone else involved. It's okay because you don't want it all on your shoulder either, because then you don't want to feel like you let them down. So it's okay for someone else to come in. I wish I would have pushed more with Angelo, to keep bugging him about what's going on, because it wasn't, his character totally changed. But, I really thought that he became a man. And to me, in my mind, that was okay. So just don't give up on anybody. And it's okay to seek help. It's very important.
Ricky.
Yeah, I mean, echo everything that's been said, because it is important to be direct with the person and try not to be indirect, but you also may have to be vulnerable with them so they're vulnerable with you, get their guard down. But it is a hard thing. And when people will, like in a lot of times in the military, if someone never seen direct combat or didn't, so they think their trauma is less than, this other person's trauma. But it's a funny thing how the brain works. Everyone's trauma is identical, the way the brain reacts chemically to it at the very first trauma. So, we've been building these neural pathways since infancy on how to react to bad situations. Just because I've been exposed to different bad situations than someone else doesn't mean they're less than me. So I want people to know, like, that's why I try to tell colleges and schools when I go and talk to them, just because your trauma may be from bullying right now doesn't mean it's less than mine. You still deserve help and you still need to have quality of life. So it's making sure people understand they're not less important than another person.
Thank you for that. And I'll echo Morgan's comment. That is an epic beard. Lisa, I'm going to give you final comment here, and I think Ricky's point about your trauma is no less your trigger is no less than mine. It's how we deal with it. But I would like for you to offer final comment here.
Yeah, I do want to echo what several of you have said about being direct. You're never going to plant the idea in someone's head if you ask them if they're thinking of hurting themselves, and you might save their life. So always ask if you have concern. And, don't just take their first answer as the final answer, but give them a chance to really open up. But also remember that one of the key symptoms of severe depression is hopelessness and helplessness. And they feel like they are in a long, dark tunnel with no end, but you can see the end and you can see the light at the end of that tunnel. And you have to be the one to carry that for them and to really, sort of carry that hope and let them know that even though right now it seems like it's never going to get better, it doesn't work like that. Things always get better. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the quote from a man who jumped off of the Golden Gate Bridge, Kevin Baldwin. He said, I'm going to read it. He said, "I instantly realized that everything in my life that I thought was unfixable was totally fixable, except for having just jumped." He survived. So, perspective is really distorted during depression, and sometimes suicide really feels like the only way out, but it's not. And as friends and supporters and caregivers, we have to be the ones to hold that knowledge for people.
Well, Lisa, thank you for those comments. And I want to thank the panel. I think Courtney probably will pop back up here and thank us as well. Honestly, one of the best panels I've ever moderated.